I stood in the small kitchen of the bakery under the light, where the smell of flour and vanilla usually brought me a sense of peace. But today, my head was spinning, not from work, but from the glasses of wine the night before. My hands shook as I rummaged through the counter, from the drawers full of utensils to the trash cans full of boxes. My phone was gone. I cursed under my breath, trying to recollect the night before, the sloshing glasses of wine, the echoing laughter, and the blurry face of the woman my husband, John, had mentioned so casually. What does she have to do with this? I wondered, anger rising like flames licking through the hot oven behind me. Unable to contain myself, I dashed into the tiny bathroom at the back of the shop, shrugging off my coat to wash my face, hoping the cold water would bring me back to reality. But as I was about to hang it up, I stopped. A red mark stood out on her collar. Lipstick. Did she leave this mark? I clutched my shirt, my heart pounding as if it was about to jump out of my chest. Was what I thought proper? She was here, right in my bakery? My breath quickened. I rushed out, intending to scream or confront someone. I didn't know who, but only saw an unfamiliar car passing through the alley behind the bakery, then disappearing. A cold wind blew past, making me shiver. What was I afraid of? I stood there, helpless, and finally decided to return to the bakery, putting everything aside for now. The following day, Cakes Under the Lights was bustling as usual. The bakery was more than just a store, it was a phenomenon in this small town, thanks to the cheesecake recipe I'd spent 3 years perfecting, piece by piece. Customers lined up every morning, praising the smooth creaminess and crispness of the crust. But today, the atmosphere in the shop was different, more oppressive than usual. Helen, my closest employee, walked in with a nervous expression. She held a piece of paper in her hand, her eyes avoiding mine. "Emma, next week's big order is cancelled," she said, her voice shaking as if she were about to cry. I snatched the paper from her hand and scanned the black print. Mrs. Vanderbilt, a VIP customer who used to order cakes for every significant event of the year, had switched to Derek's Delights, our biggest competitor. "What the hell?" I growled, throwing the paper down on the table, the paper hitting the wood with a dry clang. Helen sighed, mumbling an explanation. "They say Derek's cakes are cheaper and better." I sneered, trying to keep my composure despite the turmoil inside. "Better? He's just making cakes stuffed with chemical sugar." But when I looked into Helen's eyes, I saw her worry, and a thought flashed. That was what I was thinking, right? Was Derek playing dirty? Without another word, I rushed into the kitchen, checking everything. The ingredients were neatly arranged on the shelves: butter, cream, flour, all good. Until I opened the sugar bin. A strange smell hit me. It was not sugar's sweet, pure smell, but something harsher and more chemical. I tasted a little and immediately spat it out. The sugar was adulterated, enough to ruin the cake's taste without anyone first noticing. "Who did this?" I yelled, startling Helen back away. She shook her head, her voice slurring. "No one but the staff comes in here." I looked at her, my eyes sharp. Was Helen loyal? Or was she hiding something? Doubt crept into my mind, but I sighed, trying to hold it. "Okay," I said, my voice low. "We'll do it all again. I won't let Derek win that easily." That afternoon, I drove to the Three Rivers Hotel, where the woman with John's phone was staying. I needed it back, not just because it was my husband's, but because I wanted to confront her and know the truth. I knocked on the door of room 301, determined. The door opened, and she wore a thin robe, her red lips curled in defiance. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone teasing as if she were playing a joke. "My husband's phone," I replied, my voice cold, emotionless. She laughed, a laugh that echoed loudly in the quiet hallway. "He left it here after a night of fun. What do you think about that?" I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, but I kept calm. "Give it to me, or I'll call the police." She shrugged, tucked the phone into her shirt, and sneered. "Call, I'll wait." I was helpless, not wanting to get involved with her any further. Finally, I called John. He arrived within 10 minutes, his face as cold as ice, not a wavering moment. "Give it to me," he said to her, his voice low but sharp as a knife. She tried to flirt, reaching out to touch his shoulder, but John pushed her hand away, took the phone with a decisive movement, and turned to me. "Let's go." I watched him, admiring his composure and confused by the mixed emotions in my heart. Was he always this calm? Or was he hiding something? I followed him to the car, my mind filled with doubt. When I got home that night, I caught a whiff of a strange perfume on John's shirt. It didn't smell like him, strong, cloyingly sweet, like the scent of the new cake Derek had promoted. "Where have you been that smells like that?" I snapped, my anger flaring like an overheated oven. John frowned, his voice flat. "Must be from a client." I smiled faintly, unable to hide my sarcasm. "What client uses cheap perfume?" He sighed, about to explain further, but I cut him off. "Don't lie. I'm not stupid." The tension between us was like a string pulled to the breaking point. But then he fell silent, and I didn't want to push things further. I turned away, my heart in turmoil. Was I being too sensitive? I wondered but couldn't find an answer. The next day, while cleaning the shop, I found an invitation to a party for the town's elite. Promoting Pa by the Light was a golden opportunity to make up for the loss of Mrs. Vanderbilt's order. I convinced John to go, though he wasn't keen. "That crowd is full of fakes," he muttered, hands in his pockets. "But they have money," I said, smiling conciliatorily. He shrugged, reluctantly agreeing. "Okay for you." I wore a pink dress at the party and confidently carried trays of miniature cheesecakes to introduce. I went from group to group, offering them a taste. Mrs. Vanderbilt, who had cancelled my order, stopped in front of the tray, picked up a slice, sniffed it, and took a small bite. Her eyes lit up. "That's the flavor I wanted," she said excitedly. "I'll put in a big order for next week." I glanced at John, who nodded approvingly from afar. I did it, I thought, relieved. But then the alcohol kicked in, and things spiraled out of control. I drank too much, the glasses of red wine filling and emptying in my hands. My mind was hazy, and I started blurting out things I shouldn't have. "If I didn't marry you, I would have a dozen suitors," I yelled at John, my voice haughty. He frowned, his eyes darkening. "What did you say?" I laughed, unable to stop. "You think you're my only choice?" He stepped forward, pulled me close, and suddenly kissed me, a complex, angry kiss. I pushed him away, screaming, "Your kissing skills are terrible!" But then, for some reason, I pulled him back, kissing him harder as if to erase all doubt and anger. Everything became a blur in that moment, the wine, the music, the people around me, all faded away. What am I doing? I panicked inside, but my body refused to obey. When I pulled away, I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks, "Whatever this marriage is, don't let me catch you cheating." John looked at me, his voice low but firm. "There's no one else, Emma." I wanted to believe him, but part of me couldn't. I sobbed, and he held me tight until I fell asleep in his arms. The following day, I woke up in his bed, still heavy with alcohol and shame. He entered the room with a glass of water, gently helped me into my coat, and kissed me lightly on the forehead. "Get some rest," he said, his voice warm. I shook my head. "I have to get back to the shop." He sighed but didn't stop me. I felt strangely light as I left the house, as if all my doubts had been temporarily erased. Do I love him? I wondered, but I didn't dare answer. When I arrived at the bakery, Helen handed me an anonymous envelope sent through the post. I opened it, and inside were papers and receipts, evidence that Derek had paid to have our sugar adulterated, ruining our cakes all this time. "Who sent this?" I muttered, reading each line, each number. My suspicions were now confirmed. Derek was behind it all. Helen and I immediately planned to use this evidence to expose him and protect the bakery. But then, a small piece of paper fell out of the envelope. The handwriting was scrawled, "Be careful with your neighbor." I looked up at Helen, my heart beating faster. Did she send this? Or did John? Was what I thought right? My hands shook, and I didn't know who to trust anymore. That night, John drove me home. I was silent in the car, my mind racing with unanswered questions. He held my hand, and I felt a strange, if fleeting, sense of peace. But when we got home, I saw a figure standing at the door. Holding a box of cookies from Derek's Delights, the woman from the hotel smiled wickedly. "Your husband says hello," she said, her voice sweet but venomous. John stiffened beside me, and I knew everything was about to fall apart again. But the bigger truth was waiting. The anonymous envelope wasn't from Helen or the other woman. It was from Derek himself. He deliberately set me up to doubt John, to drive us apart so he could easily take over the bakery. And his goal wasn't just money, but revenge on John for a secret from his past that I had never known.